Purpose of this meeting is really just to preview the issues that we have at town meeting, to surface any issues that we might have, go through procedural questions that might come up. So the ultimate goal is that we have a smooth meeting and one that is effective in terms of getting the town's business done. I was thinking about this today. This is my third annual meeting as moderator. It's the first time it hasn't been a speed dial meeting because of COVID. We've tried the last two annual town meetings really to compress things and move things along. So I'm taking a deep breath, and we're going to do a little slower pace, but we're still going to try and be efficient and get things done. First of all, one thing people should understand is this is a meeting which you participate in by coming to the meeting. There's no remote means, there's no voting, absentee voting, and that's a function of state law and the nature of an open town meeting. So I know there's been a lot of questions about work and family obligations, and it's difficult to get to a town meeting. It is only once a year. It's the annual town meeting, and no one has yet devised the technology to do this remotely, at least for an open town meeting where people can come and go. So if you have an issue and you want to participate, show up at the high school at 7 o'clock on Monday night. The next issue I want people to be aware of is the advisory committee's booklet. This is invaluable in terms of, it lays out the procedure for the town meeting, lays out all the financial facts and figures. The advisory board spends better part of a year, one or two nights a week, going through every issue that's being dealt with, questioning the administration, doing the research that needs to be done, and they are the experts on what's coming up on each and every article on the warrant. Law requires them to make a recommendation, and they put all of those recommendations and the rationale for them in this booklet, and it's invaluable. I suggest everyone look at it. It is available online at under the advisory committee website. There's a slot on the town of Scituate. So that's an important thing to look at. It's also available in the town clerk's office if people want hard copies. What else do we have here? One of the issues that's come up, I think, in most of the meetings, except the one that we had on the ball field, was the difficulty of hearing at the meetings. And I've had several complaints the last two meetings that people couldn't hear what was being said. The sound people have, Kathy has them lined up. They're conscious of it. They try to make adjustments. They get here the night before and they work around the space by space going around and trying to make the adjustments they can. It's just a difficult space from what I understand. And I think the remedy for a lot of people is just you've got to get up and move to a different proximity to the speakers. But I do want people to let me know if they're, if they make the effort to come to the meeting and then they're missing half of it. That's not good. That's not what we want. So if anyone is aware of a problem, hearing what's going on with the sound system, let us know, and at least we can ask the sound people to make adjustments, or maybe we can find locations that are better as we go along. So that's an issue we're very much aware of. We want to work on. Karen?
A question, do the sound people know if there are better and worse places to sit? Because if you do have problems, if you direct people to sit in certain places.
We have hearing impaired headphones.
I know, but people know what. I guess what I'm saying is if there are a couple of places in the room that are more obvious.
Yeah, I think a lot of it is a function of how people fill into the room, from what I understand, 'cause we've had that conversation with them, and apparently the way the sound moves around in the room, it's impacted.
The speakers too, with the microphones, I notice it all the time. The mic's here, they're over here. If you're not directed at the mic, or you're not lowering it for somebody that was there 6'7" before you, and you're 5'5", you got to bring the mic down. You have to speak clearly into the mic. My name is Kathleen Carnes. That's not gonna work. You know, you have to project and you have to speak clearly and slowly. And let us know if you can't hear myself or the moderator too. We don't know. We can hear ourselves, but so, you know, speak to Heather, my assistant. She can text me saying we're having a hard time hearing you. Talk to Jim, talk to whatever, and we'll make an announcement or we'll say something.
Stand up and say you can't hear. I mean, you know, Dan.
Yeah, I'm one of the ones who complain, because I'm deaf as a bag of nails. But the speakers in the back of the room, if you stand in front of the speakers in the back of the room, it seems to be very clear. And I haven't tried to go around the side, but I did notice walking back in, that's one area that's very pleasant as far as hearing.
It's good to know. Okay, so, I mean, that seems to be the solution, is the location of where you're at. So, anyway, we don't want someone to come to the meeting and then feel that they're missing it. So, let us know if that's going on. We'll do our best to address it. There's a lot of talk, you know, about the procedure and parliamentary procedure at these meetings. It's really not that big a deal. I mean, it boils down to this. We have a number of warrant articles. That defines what the topic of discussion is. To address those, we have a motion under each article, and the motion is the action to be taken relative to the article. The motion has to be within the scope of the article so that the actions that are taken at town meeting are ones that could reasonably be anticipated if you just sat down and looked at the warrant. The motions are made. We will try and do it in this order this year. I think sometimes we've gotten out of order a little bit. The sponsor of the article, which in a lot of them is the Board of Selectmen, some it's the Community Preservation and their articles, will make the motion, and that will be it at that point. We will then get the recommendation of the advisory committee next. Whoever is assigned, we have that list, which is very helpful to us. And they will provide the advisory committee's recommendation, which is not only what the vote was, but generally a brief description of the rationale of why the motion is supported or not. And then we will go back, and then if it's a motion that requires the recommendation of another body, for example, zoning requires the planning board's recommendation, community preservation requires the community preservation recommendation. We will go to get that recommendation. We will also, it's a tradition in Scituate, it's not something that's required, but it's a tradition that the Board of Selectmen takes a position on each article, and we'll ask what the Board of Selectmen's position is on the article. We will then go to the person who has presented the motion and give him or her the opportunity to make their presentation in support of the motion that they've just made. Then we'll go to the people from the floor. We try and do that in the order that people go to the microphones. And the basic rule is you get one shot until everybody else has had a shot, then you might be able to come back. In general, the protocol that we've used in Scituate, again, it's part of the tradition, 10 minutes for the person or the entity who is making the presentation as the sponsor of the article, 5 minutes for all other speakers. We, you know, keep an eye on that. It's not going to be, we're not going to penalize someone for 20 seconds over, but if people are going to speak, they should understand that those are the parameters of what they, how long they should speak.
So no
And of
egg
course,
timer?
brevity is the soul of wit.
Do you want an egg timer?
Yeah, I've got one right here.
I got
Yeah,
one, okay.
yeah. We don't want anyone to feel that they missed out on an opportunity to participate because of a procedural issue. If someone has a question on procedure, they just come to a microphone, say point of order, and ask their question. If there's any confusion, we want to straighten it out before the vote comes, and the sooner the better. So if someone feels, you know, I mean, there are times when we've missed something up, I've missed something, and if someone would point that out to me, I'd appreciate it. So let's try and, you know, if anyone has questions, if they don't understand what's happening, or, you know, what a particular action is going to do, we'd like to hear about that and make sure that we can provide some clarity. One of the things we hope to do at this meeting is, if there are concerns, procedural questions, issues that come up that we can anticipate at the meeting and be ahead of. I have an email, it's the email address is sitmod, SCITMOD @gmail. I'd be more than happy to respond to any questions that people have before the meeting, any concerns, any red flags that they might want to raise, so that we can deal with them before the meeting and it doesn't hold up the meeting. Any other questions on general process or procedure before we move on to the specific items in the warrant? Good. First, we're going to have the special meeting. That consists of 5 articles, 4 of which we're going to go, I think this is either the 4th or 5th year, where we've used the consent agenda as a way to deal all in one bite with all of the routine things that come up. The way we'll handle that is I will go through each of the articles that has been selected to be in the consent agenda, identify what they deal with. If anybody feels that they'd like to discuss them, they have questions about them, they just have to say hold. That article will be removed from the consent agenda and dealt with separately so people can have their chance to ask questions, make presentations, etc. So the idea of the consent agenda is it is by consent. And if people feel they have questions or something is moving too fast for them, all they have to do is say hold. And we'll pull that article out of the consent agenda so that people have a full and fair chance to discuss what they want. That being said, the first 4 articles on the consent agenda are pretty routine items. Unpaid bills, budget reconciliations, and that's basically where there was an underage or an overage in a particular budget item, and it's really going back to what was originally intended in last year's budget to either add or subtract in order to make the numbers come together. The CPA budget amounts are simply balancing, redistributing the funds in accordance with what state law requires. I'm trying to remember what Article 3 was.
Snow and ice, snow and ice deficit.
Oh, right, snow and ice. We did have ice this year, Jim, right?
Yeah, we're probably gonna go over that, we're
All
pretty
right, I'm
close right
kidding,
now.
I'm just kidding. It seemed like a pretty mild winter, but I was in Florida for most of it, so.
Don't start. Don't get me started.
All right, and then Article 5 on the special is the water treatment plant. Given that that's a $50 million price tag, they didn't put that in the consent agenda. So we will have a presentation on that, and I'm sure that'll generate some discussion. That's going to require a 2/3 vote. The consent agenda, because it includes unpaid bills at a special town meeting, requires a 9/10 vote. So effectively, in order to pass the consent agenda, we basically has to be unanimous. That will take care of the special, and then we will move on to the annual. Now, again, we have a consent agenda, same process. Someone wants to pull an article out from the consent agenda and have a discussion, please do. It's going to be a matter of saying hold. The items that are in the consent agenda are the compensation for elected officials, reports of boards of committee, the waterway, golf, wastewater, transfer, water, enterprise funds, the balancing the revenue with the excess revenue going into the stabilization fund, revolving fund limits. We have to set a limit for how much each revolving fund can hold. And again, for this coming year, the reconciliation of the CPA income allocated to the various community preservation activities. So that would be the consent agenda.
Oh, two more. That's general law and acceptance.
Oh, that's right, I'm sorry, we got the, I didn't have that. The Chapter 91 liability, which every town does, and no one understands, and the acceptance of land at Deer Common Drive. So those are all part of the consent agenda, and that will require a 2/3 vote as well. Then we will move...
9/10? 9/10 vote or 2/3?
2/3 on the special requires 9/10. The consent agenda on the annual requires 2/3.
Okay.
All right. Then, we will go back to the items that are not in the consent agenda. Oh, before I get to this, I think we usually have an opportunity somewhere before we get to the budget, but since some of the budget items are included in the consent agenda, I think before we actually start with the articles and the consent agenda, I'd like to give the chairman of the Board of Selectmen a chance to give a brief overview. Again, that's within the 5 minutes, so we're talking brief. But we'll see, Karen. And the school committee would have the same opportunity if someone wants to do it, Bill, if not. I know there's a pretty good summary of the school budget in the advisory committee booklet that was helpful, I think, so. But whatever you think the committee wants to do. And we will go through and have the chair of each committee, selectmen, school committee, advisory, planning board, community preservation, just quickly, given, if people are there, introduce who the members of those committees are. Each of those committees has a role at town meeting in terms of being required to make a recommendation. So I think it's useful for people to know who they are and be able to put a name to the face as we go along. So we'll take care of all of that before we actually start the business in the annual town meeting. And then we'll have those brief summaries. I know Congressman Lynch's office has been in touch that he hopes to come if he's not in Washington. And if any of our local representatives want an opportunity, they certainly would be allowed to have brief remarks. All right, then we get to the articles that are not part of the consent agenda in the annual meeting. And the first of those is the capital project budget, which is the capital improvement plan, which is Article 3. On that, I think we will have a presentation from a member of the Board of Selectmen, whose name I have here. Which will be...
Karen Connolly?
Warren Hart.
Oh, it's Laura?
Yeah, it's Mara is on that, and Linda is
Oh,
from
she's
the
on
advisory
okay, you're on
committee.
the budget. I get it. I'm in the wrong one.
Yeah,
Capital plan.
and so we will go through that. In general, we have not gone through each of the items with holds in the past. I think we can do this if there's a question, someone can get up and ask a question about a specific item. I think to take the time to do the hold on that is probably not very efficient, and but certainly people can, we're taking it all together, but certainly someone can get up and ask a question on any one of the capital items and get their answers. Next item will be the annual operating budget. In that, we will go through, after we've had a motion from the Board of Selectmen, and go through item by item and ask if anyone has an area, one of those items that they want to have some discussion on or they have questions on, to say hold. We'll hold those items. We'll then go back and vote all of the items that have not been held, and then we'll go back in order to go through the the held items and answer questions or entertain discussion as we go through. Next article we have, I think, it's not in the consent agenda, is Article 17.
How about 12, the CPC?
Okay, I'm sorry.
Is that the one? I think it's that, that's the next one.
Okay, yeah,
Right,
12 is a specific, 13 is the, just allocating the receipts from the,
Right.
which will be in the consent agenda. Article 12 is the specific projects that are being recommended. I note that the lighthouse was not, lighthouse is in the, I know some people have expressed interest in the lighthouse, and I think that is in the special town meeting.
It's in both. There's 100,000 in the special town meeting for us to get started with the engineers and the architects, and then the
Okay.
balance is in the annual town meeting, 1.9 million.
Item 6.
Okay,
In both.
all right.
CPC.
All right, so that the main appropriation is here, okay. All right, so people will have an opportunity to discuss that, and now that I've been informed, I'll make sure I can say that when we get to the special town meeting, so people understand which is which. And we'll go through that, we'll get a presentation from the Community Preservation Committee. This is their article. Again, there's a good description of the projects in the appendix and the advisory committee's booklet with diagrams and pictures and so forth, so it's, if people look at that in advance, to give them a pretty good feel for what's under consideration there.
Did I give you 14 links? I'm just looking at your tabs to make sure I did your book right.
Yeah, 13 is, no, they didn't have a tab, but that's all right.
But does
We're good.
14 have a tab? I messed up your book, I'm sorry.
I think you messed up my book. I'd be lost if I didn't have the book, so I'm not worried about it, no. That's just 13 and 12. Kathy does a terrific job of pulling all this together, so all I really have to do is go tab by tab by tab and try and read it fast, that's all. We next get to zoning, and we will deal with Article 17, which is,
I'm sorry. Go back to the wind turbine curtailment, Article 14.
oh, I skipped that one, didn't
You
I?
did?
Yeah, I
You
did, yeah.
I'm just
okay.
trying to keep you on track.
All right, so
Mr. Toomey.
she didn't have a tab for the
Mr.
wind turbine
Moderator.
either.
Just trying to keep you in line. Oh, yeah, and then there's 15.
Yeah, let me just straighten this out.
If only, it could be
All right.
that quick.
See why we have this meeting, don't you?
All right. Did you get 14? I hope I didn't miss
Yeah,
that.
it's-
Oh, you know what, it's right after 13. I didn't tab it.
Imagine that, 14 is after 13.
Well, never
All right, we got it straightened out here. We'll put a tab in for Article 14. Article 14, we will not skip over. That is the partial curtailment of the wind turbine. We have two articles, one dealing with nighttime reduction in the hours of operation, and the other at the very end, a resolution to cut it out entirely. Although the two overlap, I think we'll take one at a time and do it in the order that they're here in the warrant. So I expect by the time we get to the last article, people will be fairly well informed about wind turbine operations at that point. In any event, we will deal with Article 14. Now can I go to 17?
You got 15, right?
15, okay.
Small
All right, I see,
guaranteed
all right,
restricted.
just got some
I
tabs.
just didn't tab those. I
That's
don't
all
know
right,
why.
that's fine.
Just fire me, please.
All right, we have a
Somebody.
small grant, non-deed restricted program on the, for the Affordable Housing Trust. I don't imagine that's too controversial.
Now you may go to 17, Mr. Moderator.
Now we can go to 17. I just couldn't wait to get to the zoning board
It's
and the
exciting.
planning board and talk about business districts.
Adrenaline rushing.
This Article 17, any particular controversy around this? It looks, it's a housekeeping, more or less. Okay. After 17 comes 18, which is the lot size regulations. We're adding a radius, basically, for the lots. Any controversy around that we know of? So all the zoning require a 2/3 vote. Then we have an update of the non-conforming structure portion of the bylaw. Again, is that going to generate much discussion?
It generated some discussion in the public hearing, so I think it's really different from town, so they will, I don't think it's the case.
Okay, and that's 2/3. Now, that brings us to the Articles 20 through 25, all of which deal one way or another with marijuana. And I want to try and be real careful about separating what each of the articles deals with, because I think there's been some confusion about zoning for marijuana versus allowing marijuana, et cetera. So I think we want to be real clear. The first warrant article, which is 20, deals with the medical marijuana, which is now called a marijuana treatment center, which is a separate issue entirely from the issue of allowing marijuana in the town. Medical marijuana cannot be prohibited. It's not, the prohibition is not allowed for the town in the statute. So this is a matter of updating the current section of the bylaw that deals with medical marijuana. There may be some discussion on this, but this is basically, I think everyone will understand, medical marijuana is a separate issue. It's just a matter of bringing this bylaw up to date, and as we've learned some of the things that have gone along with medical marijuana. All right, so that then brings us to Article 21. Article 21 would insert rules and regulations in the zoning bylaw in the event that marijuana, the prohibition on marijuana in the town is revoked. Yes, sir.
One question, having had 20 years' experience working in zoning laws, this will be a very contentious, very long, debate. So why are you putting the zoning before the lifting of the general ban? You don't lift the general ban, but you go through the entire process of the zoning. It's almost like wasting time and effort. If we lift the general ban, then we can discuss the zoning, but if we don't lift the general ban, then why discuss the zoning?
That's a very valid question. And the answer is that we first have to have, well, the answer is these all have to be approved by the Attorney General. And the Attorney General's office kind of has a formula in which how you should approach this. And their formula is you should have zoning in place in the event that marijuana, commercial marijuana activity is allowed in your town. That's why we're going in that order. I completely understand your point.
But my secondary point is this, you 2/3 pass zoning.
Correct.
50% plus one pass the
Yes.
lift the ban. If you lift the ban, if you don't pass the zoning, what happens?
I would guess that maybe the planning board would ask for reconsideration on the zoning.
I think town.
That's just a guess, but or someone would.
No, there's two areas, so you do need a 2/3 vote to lift, to lift the ban and zoning law, and that's before the general law. Yes, it's a 2/3 vote.
Yeah. But we have to be conscious, that's not really the effect of marijuana ban. It's the general bylaw that I think is more effective, but I hear counsel raising her eyebrows, so I'll listen to counsel.
Well, I did raise my eyebrows. My concern and the indications from the AG's office has been, although not exactly on point, if you pass one, you can allow it, and so if you lift the prohibition in the town, it doesn't make sense to have prohibition. I think maybe all of them is a general bylaw. But what you could not do, is you could not allow marijuana and then try to prohibit it with the general law. Now, that's slightly different because they're both already in place. But the indication is the general, because it doesn't require as much of a majority and as much will of the people, it would unlikely you'd have inconsistent results, or the zoning might trump. There's nothing directly in the that cannot put in place a prohibition through a general, if you allowed it in zoning.
So,
That's slightly different.
so we now have a zoning prohibition, which basically is a land use provision that says there's no place in town where you can put none of our land can be used for commercial marijuana. And legally, that means that's effective.
Yeah.
Okay. So, all right, so that answers the two-thirds question then. We're going to have a two-thirds vote to remove that.
Yeah.
And other than, if that doesn't happen, there will be an ongoing restriction of no marijuana in the town of Situate, no commercial marijuana in the town of Situate.
Now, if we look at the ban, if we look at the general ban, 50% plus one, then
I think right now, if you're going to put something in place, then why are you going to follow the prohibition there? And two-thirds of people want marijuana, then only a simple majority would want to do it. If somehow things go differently, we're at the mercy of what the AG does, because it hasn't really happened that way, and you might have inconsistent zoning. If there'll be an inconsistency, and somebody will be upset enough one way or the other. But I can't give you a legal opinion on a definitive answer of what would happen, but it would not make sense. And when we ask the Attorney General's office, like, why would that happen? It's like, well, you know.
Well, I mean, I can envision that we get a 60% vote on the zoning, which will not be effective to remove the prohibition. But with that same 60% would vote to remove the general bylaw prohibition.
I think you still have a prohibition in that situation.
Okay,
Because the zoning would still be in place.
okay. We could have it, but there's no place you can put it, is basically the way it would come out. All right.
Can I ask another question? So, in that case, if he's saying that zoning is general, should we be going first on the articles, the new zoning articles, that there's an amendment, or do we should we go from the
Well, but I think the issue there, as I understand it, and correct me if I'm not clear on this, as I understand it, is the AG wants you to say, if you're going to remove the ban, before you do that, you better have some regulation in place. And so I think the thinking is, talk about what the regulation looks like first, before you have a situation where you have a permitted use with no definition whatsoever of how you're going to do it. So I think it's important for people to understand on this first article is not a vote for or against marijuana. It's a vote that's contingent, that sets up a process and regulations in the event that commercial marijuana activity is allowed in the town. So I think what we want to do is have people understand that the vote on Article 21 is not going to allow or disallow marijuana in general, but it is going to provide a regulatory place for how it would be run. Linda?
So, in this space, he's sort of question there. So if you present it like that, people who don't want marijuana in town may very well vote to zone it because they want to make sure it's in place. So that somebody, is going to vote to get the zoning in because, they're saying we should have it, and therefore we
Well, no, because we still have the basic, in the zoning bylaw, to deal with the yes or no question on zoning. So, and I think that the section, I'm going to go back, I didn't have a chance to reread it for today's meeting. I'm pretty sure, correct me wrong, Karen, that says that the regulations are effective only in the event that there's a allowance, the ban is lifted.
Put that right in there, don't it, so that both the general bylaw and the zoning bylaw have to be repealed in the zoning code for anything to be effective.
So if I were an opponent, and I have no, I'm absolutely neutral on this. If I were an opponent, I would vote yes on 21, so I'm sure that if my opposition fails, then there's some regulation in place.
Okay, so that is contradictory to what I'm saying.
Okay.
Originally, it started out that way, and then everybody said, no, if you're against marijuana, vote no against.
And that's what I'm trying to clarify.
This is where there's a problem.
Right.
And this is where the presentation of this is so very important.
Okay.
Because if you are against it, and people just vote no everywhere, then they vote no. But it's presented at town meeting as, whether you want it or not, you want zoning laws in place, changes the whole vote. And I think that's why there's so much concern about the order of things, and about, what can happen is, if, two-thirds of the people, they vote on 21, pass zoning, and then half of them leave for whatever reason for this town meeting. And now you only need 50% to pass the, or fail the general bylaw. It just, it's a total issue with the presentation of it and what the end result will be. We're saying that if we vote the zoning laws in, but then we don't pass the bylaws, well, we're safe from lawsuits. I think somebody else is saying we're not safe from lawsuits, and we know that there isn't already facing
Well,
this.
thank God we're never safe from lawsuits.
Well, and I understand that, you can always be sued, no matter what,
And we are.
you can sue for everything. But I just want to be clear,
No,
that
all right,
you understand, if you're for marijuana and against marijuana, this is how you should vote.
All right,
You know?
can I, here's what I would think I want to try and do, Linda, and help me out on this, that's why we're having this meeting, is I want people to understand that the vote on Article 21, which would set up a regulatory scheme, in the event that the prohibitions were removed, is not a vote on the prohibitions. It is simply a vote on a regulatory scheme, set of regulations which would apply if the prohibition is removed. I don't know how, I mean, is there another way to get it clearer?
Mr. Chairman, that we are going to submit to the town, Article 21 that will be presented to town meeting says, these changes, if coupled with the vote to remove the existing marijuana ban, provides adequate regulation for illegal land use and controls for marijuana establishments. That is what we are seeking.
I think people need to understand, that just to take a simple piece of the regulation, okay? Regulation says you can't have more than 2 commercial operations in town. That's a limitation it has.
Retail.
Right. If that is not approved by 2/3, the others are removed, the 2 bans are moved by a 2/3 and a majority vote, you'll have the opportunity for unlimited number of retail establishments in town.
Anywhere.
So that, I mean, I think that's an example of what this,
Can I just ask again, so if I'm against marijuana establishments, should, just in case something crazy happens in town meeting, I should be voting yes on the zoning and no on everything else, and that will protect us and from, a potential lawsuit.
I can't sit here and tell you that will help protect you from a lawsuit. I can tell you there are a split of opinion on how to do it. I can also say we've talked to the Cannabis Control Commission, we've talked to the Attorney General, we've done everything we can, we've looked at other towns have done, haven't done, the laws are in fact different from what we're trying to do. So the best we can do is minimize the ability for anyone to file a suit, which is why we put them in before they put the caveat in that it will not be effective unless the bans get lifted. We assume the AG won't strike that, but it hasn't been, that has not been tested. So we're assuming that that's going to protect us from anyone saying you've done something inconsistent. It's like, you know, because you can put limitations in zoning of when they become effective, or how they become effective. We've done it in other areas. You know, like it might not become effective till July 2010 or something. Going forward. But if it was me, and I may be different from Jim or different from you, and I can't sit here and tell you there's one right way to think. If I was against it, in my heart, my mind would be no, no, no. If I was in favor, I would be yes, yes, yes. And I think thinking from the state's perspective, people are going to be thinking one way or the other. The biggest risk is if you do not have zoning in place, and the zoning is not passed, and then the prohibitions come in, so you do not want to have it passed, the prohibition get lifted, and then not have, and then people fight about the zoning.
But then you're saying if the zoning doesn't pass and that statement, you know, is in there, that says it's only effective if these two
That's the best you
get
can do.
lifted. So, I get that, so if zoning doesn't pass, and if for some reason the other two pass, maybe we'll go then stand up and ask for reconsideration on zoning?
That would be my suggestion.
Okay, anybody could.
Yeah. I mean, I would think,
Oh, right, yeah.
I would think if it became that clear that we're going to have commercial marijuana operations in town, I would think it would be appropriate, now that you have that clarity, to take again another look at what kind of regulation of it you have.
So again, it makes more sense to vote on the general ban before the zoning, as you just explained why. It makes more sense, if we are gonna have the possibility to have a market that we then zone, rather than have a 2.5 hour debate over zoning, that may or may not pass, and then end up passing the lifting of the general ban. That just, throw a wrench into everything. It makes it not pass.
These zoning bylaws pass, not the bans, okay? And the bans stay in place. Am I still reporting the passing of the zoning bylaws to the AG?
Yes, because the
Because,
bylaw
right?
itself, yes, it's a zoning article that
Even though it has that
passed,
clause in it, though.
and that clause,
Okay.
it's not
She still has
effective
to review it.
until, which means
She
those
still has to
would be in
review it.
place if this
Okay.
came back in the fall
All
or
right.
another
Okay.
time, and the bans got lifted.
Gotcha.
That would be,
Then it's in place, okay.
that's what our goal is.
Gotcha.
is to
Yeah.
protect everybody.
Maybe it would be helpful if you, I don't know what the exact way to do it, but if there is a way to do it, might that have to be one article in the zoning? Can you reconsider, doesn't there have to be one article in between one that's been voted and the next, and what you're going to reconsider?
Well, there will be.
Okay, well, I'm just saying, so people, I mean, if you could review that as a rule, you know.
I mean, I would think one approach is immediately once you find out that the two prohibitions are gone, then the whole picture changes in terms of, do you want to have a zoning bylaw that governs something that is now permissible in town? So, and I understand what you're saying, Keith, but I think we have to abide by the best that the AG has given us. And I think the bottom line is, I think we'll have a pretty good sense as the debate gets started in how this is going to go. So to that extent, you know, we may see, I mean, it may be no, and if that's the case, then that's the case.
We also may be doing a PowerPoint on this too. Find the election of either there, or we have a PowerPoint that will be ready to go.
Okay, all right. So in any event, we I think all agree that Article 21 is not an up and down, yes or no vote on marijuana. It is simply to put in a regulatory scheme in the event that commercial marijuana activities are allowed in the town. Which brings us to Article 22, which is the removing the moratorium. Now, the moratorium is gone, so that is simply a housekeeping item, and it's really just taking language out of the bylaw. It requires a 2/3 vote, but that should not be, the moratorium is no longer in effect, and it's not effective. Article 23 is the zoning prohibition in the zoning bylaw. And that is where the first opportunity for people to say yay or nay to commercial marijuana activity in Scituate. So that's where the people who are pro-marijuana and the people who are against marijuana will really have their opportunity. I'm going to try and limit debate. I know on the zoning, in order to make it clear that that's not a yes or no question under Article 21 in terms of the commercial marijuana activity. I hope then that people will focus on any concerns they have about what those regulations look like. Once we get over that, is there much controversy around what the regulations provide in Article 21? I mean,
Some people think that it's controversial, it's probably what they provide, yeah.
okay, so there may be amendments, should be 3 instead of 2, or it should be 700 feet instead of 500 feet, those kind of issues are alive out there?
Yeah, they're out there.
Okay, all right, so but that's what the discussion should be in Article 21, is about the regulation, not about the merits of the prohibition.
I should have asked during the procedural section of that, but.
You're out of order, sorry. We're gonna move on.
If somebody does want to change some sort of something in there, whatever it is, do they have to have it in writing, or can it be vocalized on the floor like they think that needs to be?
If it's more than 3 words,
Okay,
it
so.
should be in writing.
So that should be something when you do it in the beginning.
Right. I'm not sure if it's in the bylaw or not, but as a matter of record keeping, it's very difficult unless we have the whole thing, and basically the form that should take is remove XYZ language on page such and such and replace it with ABC. So that, it can be that simple, but it's, because Kathy has to keep a record of that.
And
I'm
And
not
Yeah,
saying.
but if anybody that makes a new motion, seriously, and if it's voted on, should provide us with their name and contact information, and obviously the motion in writing, but also I'm gonna need it as a Word doc, so I can cut and paste it as part of my certification. So that's always been, it's kind of like, getting out. Rule 10, the advisory.
Okay,
Rule 10, she said.
good. So we get to that zoning prohibition, then we get to the tax. I'm not quite sure why we put the taxes before the general bylaw. I would argue on that, but I suspect that no one's going to be opposed to the tax, whether it's, by that point, we'll see. All right. I think at that point in the game, we'll have a pretty good idea of these other pieces will either fall in place or they won't. So that's where we'll go on that. Now, that would be interesting because time-wise, I would think, want to make sure we get through these articles in the same night, on the first night. So I think that's all doable. I think we'll get to these in time, because I think it would be super confusing if this gets broken into 2 nights and, you've got different people who, on the second night than were there on the first night. So, to that extent, timing-wise, I'm going to try and keep things moving so we can get through Article 25. And then we can get to the exciting article in 26, as to whether you should be able to sleep Chief. It's a little, not quite that simple. The issue of the camping and the RVs and so forth on public property. So, I won't be a wise guy.
You have a question?
Yes.
Mr. Moderator, can I just ask maybe a dumb question, but for this, attending and camping and sleeping, for the mooring line, that they have down in the harbor?
Well, the way I understand it, they'd have to get the permission of the select board. So it would be up to the select board to decide whether to let people pitch tents overnight for the mooring line.
This is here, there were quite a few times.
I know,
Yes,
yeah.
I mean, but, it happens.
Yeah.
Usually it happens,
Oh, not the mooring, it's the slip
it
line.
usually happens one night, they go out the night before. This year, there was someone down there on Tuesday, I think, for 4 or 5 nights, and we had a whole carnival down there. So, yeah, it would apply to them. They wouldn't be able to do that without permission.
But there is, I mean, the way this is written is a general prohibition unless they get permission from the Board of Selectmen. So if the Boy Scouts wanted to have a camp out in Cole Parkway, they'd come to the Board of Selectmen and it would be up to the board. Yes.
Hi, I have a question about the cannabis. If, say it was.
We're past the cannabis.
I
I'm
know,
sorry.
but
I don't want to go
say it
back.
was all, like, you were trying to put all together until
I'm
11 o'clock.
I'm one toke over the line.
Would you consider going past 11 o'clock to keep those 5 articles together, or split it, or are you just gonna play it by ear?
Yeah, no, we're not going to play it by ear.
Okay.
I think it'd be disaster. I mean, this is going to be tough enough. And to have it go over 2 nights. I'm not really worried about it. I mean, I think unless there's some issue that comes up that requires an awful lot of discussion before us, which I don't see here, we'll be able to get through this. But I think, and it's up to the meeting in terms of the 11 o'clock deadline,
Okay,
so.
the meeting could vote to continue or to stop.
Yes, yeah, yeah. All right, and that'll bring us to the wind turbine. Everybody will be exhausted at that point, and probably won't want to talk about that. Did I miss something, Kathy? 27, 28 is the other wind turbine, which we're going to have discussed
We got
before.
14, yeah, that was back in 14, we did that.
Yeah.
But Article 14 was the
Right,
select board's
right.
recommendation to shut it down.
All right, so after we get done with the, what's 27? 27,
Oh, that was
we've
consent
already
agenda.
taken care of 27. All right, so we'll get to 28, which is the wind turbine, which I would think people would be pretty well informed about by the time we get to this, because they would have discussed it under Article 14. So this will be a question of,
Is Ellen giving us Ellen, are you giving us a motion, or are we gonna go with what's written here?
I sent that to you.
Is this the one?
Yeah, I sent it to you.
Yeah, that's just a suggestion one. Ellen sent you one.
Did I not get your motion? I'll check my emails, I don't know if I got that on. I'll double check, and I'll email it to you if I get it.
yeah, actually, I've got a suggested motion here,
Yeah.
but I think you want to be more specific about,
Yeah,
this says adopt the following non-binding.
Yeah, I did send it.
Oh, great.
thank you. And then, I'll look in my emails, if I don't have it, I'll have you resend it.
All right, this is, we're going to have to talk this through a little bit, because this talks about the special permit, and special permit isn't part of the article. So I understand that may be a shorthand way to say what you wanted to say, but the town meeting can't rescind a special permit. So we can chat about what you want to accomplish, just to make sure you've got something that fits. Good.
So this isn't.
Yeah, no, that's not going to work. That's not going to work. I think that brings us to the end of the meeting. Any other?
Sorry,
No,
this may
no.
be rule number 10 or something, but
Is somebody on the floor allowed to stand up, like, say, right after the consent agenda and say, I want to hear article, can we vote on article 28 now? Rather than wait until 23rd. I don't even know what
Well,
article 28
it's-
is, but I'm just saying, like, are people from the floor allowed to move articles forward or backward, or we saying no to that?
The answer is yes. Takes a two,
Yeah, rule 6, I was close to next to
takes a 2/3 vote. Someone can make a motion to move things around, and if that's what the meeting wants to do, even if it's not a good idea, they can do it. Anything else? This is the longest, this is the longest moderators meeting I've ever been at.
Just one thing. Seth and Rich at the school, Mike Mancello in IT, and John Capalupo, our sound guy, are working together to have multiple screens for PowerPoint presentations. I know we have the consultant for the water project and possibly planning. And also, they were going back and forth with some new sound technology or something, and it was all Greek to me, so anyhow, so hopefully we'll have multiple screens for any presentations that need to be seen. CPC, there was, someone called about handing out flyers for the Lighthouse project for CPC. That's gonna be done outside. And then they're gonna put in 2 easels with pictures just about the Lighthouse restoration project for CPC.
If people have materials that they want to provide for people going into the town meeting, there'll be a separate table for that. So,
No,
and that's not for them to hand things out, it's a table.
right.
So, and, so if people have handouts, that'll be to one side. We just want to make it clear that those are for advocates on one side or another of an issue. They're not, it's not something that the town is putting forward. So that's all we want to make clear.
Does it have to be pre-approved?
I always ask the moderator. I just-
What's that?
Anytime anybody has a question, whether it's trying to sell Girl Scout cookies in the foyer, which, oh, heck no, sorry, heck no. Because it's just a safety issue with traffic to have kids out there. But, you know, I always run everything by the moderator. This is, you know, it's up to him.
Mr. Truby, has the John Situate ever thought about a private ballot in town meeting?
Pardon?
A private ballot?
Okay, that's the secret ballot.
Secret ballot?
That is a death knell for the operation of a town meeting, because it just takes so much time. And there's a procedure in the bylaw, it says at least 50 people, 10% of the meeting, request a secret ballot. Kathy is prepared in the event we have to do that. We have a procedure in place.
But it's a process
But-
that takes,
But I can tell you, it is so disruptive of a meeting because of the time it takes. There's just no way to do it other than have everybody stand in line. We have to hand out voting slips, have to count the ballots, so I strongly discourage that. People have the right, I'm not, it's in the bylaws, and it's allowed if 10% of the meeting and at least 50 people ask for a secret ballot, it's available. And we're prepared, Kathy's prepared to do it, but
and they're hand counted.
I would, if you know anybody who's advocating that, I'd think twice, because what can happen is you lose the whole meeting. People leave and, you know, yes.
I'm going backwards. If you have slides, what's the procedure for doing that?
You need a,
Use someone or beforehand?
that should have been talked about before today. You would have to have your laptop and put that right on there, and then it's up to the moderator, and then you'd plug in and have it set up, and it's.
Yeah, I'd
it's
advise you to
connection.
get there half an hour or
Yeah.
more before the meeting to make sure
Talk to IT.
it works. I mean, the technology stuff is great, you know, the presentations, but we're only going to allow it if we're comfortable that everybody can see it and it's available to everyone who's at the meeting. And that's, our facilities really are not well set up for that kind of thing. So we've got to take a look at that as we get there. Kathy's doing her best with the IT people and the sound people to get a number of big screens
Yeah,
for
we have
people to do
3.
that. But, you know, I don't want to have a situation where 20% of the people can see the presentation, and then everybody else is sitting in the background saying, what's going on up there? You know, we can't have that happen. That's not fair to the people. Nothing further? We'll call it quits for today. See you all Monday night at 7 o'clock, before 7.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.